horror imagery when it comes to just a man eating food. You know, like
he definitely depicts 1488 as just like a kind of repulsive time period without the supernatural elements.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Especially those monks.
Yeah. Well, and then obviously it leads into a lot of the idea of sort of like the monks and the religious authority, deciding, they were the people who would eventually burn the witches. And some of the reasons that they would burn the witches was just because, like they were made to feel horny by one of them.
I got a boner. We got to burn that girl. Too hot.
Yeah. But then he also throws in, like, obviously there's the grave robbing doctors who they do a brief aside where like they're going to do like an autopsy on a diseased body. And like, obviously, that's like a valuable thing because they're basically just like, we want to, cure diseases and we need to do science in order to do that. But even that is kind of depicted as, like something that science, even in 1488 was fairly grotesque.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, so there's this reenactment of this old woman, and then they start introducing the devil. The devil played, by the way, by
the director.
Benjamin Christensen, the director. He shows up with horns and claws to strangle and seduce.
Like, I wonder if that was a decision made by him in the sense that he's like, I really want to play the devil and have fun with it, or if he was like, I'm not going to make anybody else have to portray such an evil entity. I'm curious what his like decision making was on that.
Yeah, I'm curious if there was sort of like some metatextual thinking behind it because he very clearly seemed like a very smart and kind of ahead of his time kind of guy.
Yeah, and he's having fun with that portrayal too.
Yeah, but think about like later in the film, there's an aside where he's showing you like the medieval tools. Right. And there's a part where he actually digresses to like show him using an old medieval tool that he found like on one of his actresses. And he like breaks the fourth wall to be like, I won't tell you what confessions I was able to get out of my actress.
Yeah.
You can just imagine them.
It's a great joke, honestly. And I also what's kind of like it makes you cringe a little bit when you watch it is at one point he says that he asked her if he could go as far as he could until it like really hurt her. And you see the moment where he's like twisting the thumb screw torture device and there's
she yells.
She yells and flinches and then it cuts and then he makes that joke. And it's weird because I actually do really like the joke. I think it's very funny. But at the same time, you have to watch like one of his assistants or actresses kind of go through this sharp pain right before it. And it's and
what he's definitely doing is combining the idea of like, look, a lot of these sort of like cultural like pieces of popular imagination and fantasy, like the original drawings that we see at the beginning of the film where people imagined what witches were. He's essentially indulging in that by making this film. Film is just the new technology, but I think that sequence is him admitting that, is him being like, and literally he does it with all the hell sequences where he is actually literally doing that. He might as well just be drawing paintings of hell and the witches and everything again with some of the sequences we get to in part 3, 4, and 5. Yeah. But like, I think that was a moment of him like on screen acknowledging, that his actress in the film world just became a witch to him.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm definitely not opposed to a reading where like he chose to play the devil because maybe the director is the devil or the religious authority now, or he even eventually says like in the last part of the film, he brings it all the way to like how sort of like modern rich celebrities and doctors kind of are the people who have that kind of power nowadays. And he connects that idea all the way to like modern mental institutions and things like that.
I think
which is insane.
I think it's also really smart too, because like we were saying, the first 2 parts or so, and part 2 has a bit of it as well, but the first part is kind of just that like that educational segment, and then number 2 has it a bit, but then it gets into the reenactment and the drama a little bit more. But then in part, I think 5 or 6, where it goes to this torture device thing, I think it's really interesting because he's already kind of established a character for the witch or witches. So when you start to go into the real education on the torture devices, you start to feel a little bit more for the witches as well, just because we're introduced to kind of like a character, and now we have to be introduced to the devices that are going to harm this character or kill this character.
Oh yeah, he definitely weirdly enough, this movie is like a roller coaster experience.
It really is
just like going from documentary and essay to reenactment to
I never knew what to expect next. Like it was endless.
Yeah, to like full blown horror insanity, because what happens and the way that he gets there is that in this reenactment where he's showing you sort of like these older women, he eventually gets to the part where the real world Inquisition judges and the witch burnings start taking place, where they start accusing, this older woman of being a witch, and they start torturing her for a confession. And it has to do a little bit with like this dying man that the man's family accuses her of like, maybe making him sick and things like that. So it was as simple as accusation with no evidence of just this woman is kind of creepy because she lives in like a gross house and we don't like her and we think that she's a witch. And then the actual torture sequence itself starts taking place where they, are going after her, essentially Witchfinder General style, using medieval tools on her to get her to confess to a witch's Sabbath. And something that he does that's interesting that really makes this work even better for you is he shows this to you first before we get into the deep dive on the medieval tools for a reason.
Right.
Because he really wants to show you what she confesses to